are these people?
We're very excited to introduce Marcus and Tamara, two organizers from the Free Palestine Charleston organization. They're the ones that had the viral moment last week at Mother Emanuel AME Church when they confronted Biden regarding the Gaza conflict. So we're very fortunate to have them on. So welcome, Marcus, and Tamara, to the show.
Welcome.
Hey.
Hey, yes.
Hi.
So yeah, once again, guys, thanks a lot for being here, and just very fortunate enough that the schedule's aligned that you were able to come in and talk with us tonight. And I just actually want to kind of start off by just asking, if you don't mind kind of getting into it right away. Can you share more about your organization and how it got started?
Yeah, so I'll start and I'll pass it off to Tamara. So I'm Marcus McDonald, Charleston Black Lives Matter. Not gonna go too deep in when we started, but we've been around in Charleston since 2015, 2014, before the massacre, even after with the shooting of Walter Scott in Charleston. So we've been around the city doing this work for a minute.
Yeah, and I'm Tamara. I'm with Free Palestine Charleston. I was one of their founding members. Free Palestine Charleston is a grassroots organization that was started spontaneously between just two people that were very passionate about ending the occupation in Palestine. And they kind of just decided to start, and it's just been growing since then. And as a Palestinian, I have been aware of the Palestinian struggle for liberation, because contrary to what a lot of people believe, it didn't start following the aftermath of October 7th. It's been an ongoing struggle since the Nakba of 1948. And I've never really had the opportunity to speak on this. I've never really been welcomed in spaces to speak on it until like organizations like these were started. So I kind of jumped at the opportunity to join when an organization like this was started for us locally.
Nice.
So, well, actually, I do want to ask you since you brought it up. So, just generally as a Palestinian, how has it, well, I'm sure it was not great, prior to October 7th, but I think just how has it been, in terms of you just kind of adjusting to what's happening now, post October 7th?
I really don't think that it's anything that anyone can ever fully accept or adjust to or wrap their head around even. This is genocide at the end of the day. So people are being murdered, they're being killed, women, children, men, all of them. And this draws an interesting point about the dehumanization that goes on in the media when talking about the Palestinian struggle, because we are in an imperialist country that economically and politically benefits from the displacement and the dehumanization of Palestinians. So it's never something that I have really been able to wrap my head around or adjust to. It's very disheartening seeing people that share your same identity being killed for geopolitical gain.
So so obviously you guys had you guys went viral last week when you confronted Biden. Can you give us more details in terms of the planning that went prior into, preparing for this protest and this confrontation? I'm only asking because there's been a lot of, I think you guys have seen the heat you've been getting online in terms of, oh, these people, like, you disrupted the church and you disrupted all the grandmas
God
in the
forbid.
church and whatnot. So can you just share, like, in detail as best as you can, like, what was the planning like and how many were you who were part of this? Because from what you said in your, because you guys gave a statement afterward, there was a lot more information that wasn't necessarily communicated, or at least was not assumed to be the case. So can you just kind of clarify here, like, the details surrounding that, and then just the planning that you went prior to this confrontation.
Yeah, for sure. And I thank you for that question. I'll answer it with respect and out of the safety of some of the organizers. Some parts will be missing out, but I'll give you the scope.
Sure.
And just some background for people who didn't know. And this also helps with the context of like even the church itself. Mother Emanuel existed before 2015, before the massacre. A lot of people recognized it then, but it's my great grandmama's church. My great grandmother was actually one of the oldest members before she passed at 103. She was there from 1908 to 2011, and Reverend Clement Pinckney actually gave her eulogy, and I was there for it. So to be able to see him and like be in community again, I've seen him in sermons, et cetera, you know, as throughout my childhood, and then to see him get massacred and killed like that at that church, I think it was like around 18 when that happened, and you know, obviously being disgusted and angry and all the feelings that a lot of people around the nation, around the globe are feeling. And to be now, you know, with my organizing, I already hate it. I absolutely despise it when politicians exploit the massacre for political gain, specifically white politicians. And they'll do this locally, but also on a nationwide scale. So this is the ultimate disrespect for a man to come into this church who has blood on his hands from the genocide he's actively benefiting and promoting. And, you know, what's the word, dehumanizing Palestinians by talking about the body count isn't what it is and different things throughout this whole last few months. So when we got the news that he was going to be speaking, we got it around like Wednesday or Thursday, and we started going to meticulous planning because we're like, all right, this is happening. We're going to at least have to do something. So we organized the protest outside. We had people outside, not Mother Emanuel, because one, we knew the block was going to be shut down, but also the optics of protesting out of church is not something you want. And just being out of respect for like the general members, we didn't want to protest out there. So we was like, all right, let's do Marion Square. And out of the safety for everybody, obviously, let's do Marion Square, which is right next to it. And going back into the history of real quick about Mother Emanuel, before 2015 and just throughout, it's had a revolutionary history. Reverend Clement Pinckney was targeted because he stood up for the body cameras, for heirs property, for Black people in general, and a hate crime bill, which is later named after him, that we still haven't got passed in this state. And he was targeted for just being that person. And before him, you had Denmark Vesey, who was planned an insurrection in Charleston. He was hung, him and over 20 other Black men. This is like in the 1800s. And this is, again, a slave revolution that started. He was a founding member of Mother Emanuel. So this is the history we're talking about the church, and it goes into even the 60s of the Crest County sit-ins. I ain't gonna give you all the whole history detail, but again, this is like what goes into like us before we even go into this. We know the history. We know, again, I know the Reverend and his son and my cousins, the lead trustees. So it's like, it's not like we had no idea about this church. Like, again, we know about it. And the original plan was for me to do the interruption, because with me not only knowing the church and have that relationship with the church, but also it's like it is a Black church, and I, you know, had that relationship, had a poise to be able to do it. So, and the second plan was to have Tamara to do it because it was a historical moment to show solidarity between Black and Palestinian folks, and also her, as she said before, she's never gotten a chance to speak or have the platform for any of this to speak on these issues specifically to the president. So that was the goal, to show that solidarity. And again, we planned it in about 4 days. A group of like, you know, around 20 people against the Secret Service of about 7,000 people. And we went in, and it was really a mustard seed operation. Again, some details can be left out, but the people who came inside were registered in. Once I tried to get in, I got through the first checkpoint. The second checkpoint, I'm giving them my ID, and this white dude who I don't know at the time, Secret Service, in a suit, taps me. He's like, "Hey, you know, you're Marcus," and I already have my ID out because, you know, you have to show it to get in. And I'm like, "Yes." So let me talk to you for a second. And at that moment, I already knew like, and I'm gonna talk my way through it. It's a wrap. So I was like, all right. But I had already seen everybody else went in. So I was like, all right, boom. They're in, they're good. I'ma just like see what I can do and maybe cause a little disruption if I can outside. So like as soon as he tells me that, and generally I was real pissed off because like even like the way he went about it, he said like, "You're not welcome here." And for a white man to say that, to me outside my great grandmama church. Like, no, I started
Right.
going off. So I started.
While pointing at
I tried to limit
sign.
my curse.
Yeah.
Huh?
While
Yeah,
pointing
and I
at
was like, I was trying
sign,
to
you
limit.
know.
Yeah, and I was like, I tried to limit my curse words because we were outside the church, but I was like, I was very mad, and they started like, you had like at least like 5 or 6 Secret Service people around me at one point, and then I call everybody. I'm a call like, what's your name? What's your last name? Like, sorry, like pointing people out, and I called the Reverend, and this dude comes out. I don't recognize him at the time, but it turns out to be the Reverend, and I talked to his son, and they tell me that the reason I'm being barred from entry is because I've been outspoken on the Charleston BLM page about or against Biden and for holding them accountable for the genocide. So they see
Okay.
this and they just tell me verbatim, like, "What? I'm not let in." And I'm like, all right, whatever. Reverend shakes my hand. I end up talking to him this past Sunday. We talked it out. And I don't get let in. I stay outside. I play my trombone and make some noise. And again, the rest is history. Like, Tamara and them were let in. And there's actually somebody who wasn't even really into the deep of the plan, but she was a black lady who was a member of the church and sat next to Tamara and them. And she was the black girl who stood up. Like, I know her, I'm not going to name her, but, I have a good relationship with her. She's a recent graduate and real powerful person. Just like out of knowing like what I'm about, I've talked to her a little about it. It's like happened like almost in that way, even spontaneously. So there's a lot of folks in solidarity, AME people who weren't in the video who like stood up. So there's a lot of optics, and it's interesting to see like the media twist narratives when it's not about you and it's about something else, but when it's like about your action, we had like you know what I mean? Whoopi Goldberg and other people, we'll get into that in another question, but it's like
Speaking of,
that response was
I wanted to show
Go
the
ahead.
people at home the actual thing that happened that your comrades were capable of. So
Yeah.
it's only a minute, so super short. They don't let you protest very long.
You should honor the lives lost and call for a ceasefire in Palestine. Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now!
That's all right. That's all right. That's all right.
Yeah.
So to clarify, Marcus, you go to this church. You've grown up in this church.
Yeah, but I say I went more as a child than I do now, but I went like this past Sunday. Yeah.
Right. So did you talk to your pastor regarding your concerns about Biden coming in prior to him showing up?
No, I decided not to because I knew that I was going to raise red flags and I didn't want to put in jeopardy the mission. So I talked to him and several other people from the church afterwards.
And I'm not sure if you can mention any details, but what was said, what was said regarding after this whole went down? Like, what did your pastor say to you after this?
Well, yeah, I'm not going to go too deep in details, and it was a brief conversation, but yeah, we pretty much talked about, having mutual respect for each other and how we just have to move forward and continue the conversation. Because like, again, he knows that, my voice can't be thrown away and, that we're gonna have to exist in the same city. Like Biden already left, like we here together. So like, how can we start working with folks from the mosque, folks from, different communities and bring people together and not just be an active or be just happy to be there, but like be an active member and like how the Black church used to be, like be a place where organizers can come and really speak their voice and really welcome us more. So it's really started that conversation a little bit more.
So along with that, I do want to ask you, how did you feel with the response, assuming that many of the people in the congregation at the time do go to that church, the response that most of them had saying 4 more years after that, once you left or tomorrow?
Yeah, so I'll make a correction on that and I'll pass it to Mata. But the correction was the majority of the people in that room at that moment were not part of the congregation.
Okay.
That was more white people than I've ever seen in that church ever. I swear to God. And it was, I swear, I've never seen that many white, because it's a black church, and like white people have come there more even after the massacre, which I find kind of weird. But yeah, it's like never that many white folks out there. And again, I nothing against white people, obviously, but they like, and also they were the one who started the 4 more years chant. It wasn't like from what
Okay.
I've seen, like black
Right.
people joined in afterwards. It
Okay.
was for people who I've heard who were in the audience, like yeah, it was an older white dude who started the 4 more years chant in response to what we were saying. So I want to make that clarification. But as far as the response to people who actually go to the church and live there, you got OG elder people who like some of them might name, but like I'm talking about like people who are in the history books for what they've done and like have texted me like no reservation, like he shouldn't
Yeah.
have been there in the first place, like totally on
No,
my
killed
side.
it.
And then you
Right.
have yeah, exactly. So you have that, and then you have some of the other side being like, well, I was there and I thought you could have maybe done it differently. And you could have like they was trying to play the more respectability politics role. Like maybe you could have met him in Hannibal's. And I was like, you're talking about the president of the United States. If y'all wanted to make a table for me, you would have invited me or let me in the
Right.
church. But so
Yeah.
like you could have found your place. I wasn't given the opportunity. And as Tamara said before, she's never been given the space. And even a black young American, we don't rarely get those spaces in a lot of the older black organizations that invited him in and co-spoke with him. So the response from them sometimes been negative, but a lot of them, as I was saying before, I've been in the city doing this work. So like they like kind of understood like the overall reason behind it, and I'm like, all right, what's the next steps? Let's still conversate, whatever. And then on the middle, you had somebody who I'm also not gonna mention, but he's like really deeply connected to the massacre. A few people actually who's like had family who was killed in the massacre who like was really off-putted by it originally because like their PTSD of the massacre and like with their family, but then being like, well, like now that you talked to me about it, maybe I don't have a full understanding about what's going on there. Or, like maybe I should have been speaking about it. You know what I mean? Like, and some people even from the massacre who didn't even want him to be there because they don't like to get the church to be politicized like in that way anyway. So you had like a lot of people just from like different sides, and again, the media has taken their own little route with it and kind of like, excluded and decentered the organizers from it, which I feel like is a tactic to like kind of just like let the narrative
Well,
go as it's going. But
it leads us to our next
overall,
one of our next questions.
yeah, I
which-
said,
what
go
what
ahead,
were you
sorry.
hoping to achieve with this protest? What was the end goals here?
Yeah. What we were hoping to achieve was exactly what we stated in that church on Monday, in Mother Emanuel, which is a ceasefire. We wanted Biden to know that we are not okay with his current decisions that him and his administration are choosing, and we do not support him for choosing to side with an apartheid regime and a genocide. And that's exactly what we were hoping to get out of that, for him to call for a ceasefire. And although he did respond by saying that he was working quietly with the IOF to kind of like remove their presence outside of Palestine, working quietly is nowhere near as effective as publicly calling for a ceasefire and an end to the genocide. 20,000 people have already been murdered, and we don't want more blood on our hands, nor do we want our tax dollars funding a genocide that's happening across the Atlantic.
Do you think, would you be set, so let's say if Biden calls for a ceasefire tomorrow, in your opinion, is that enough for you? Would that be enough for you?
I think a ceasefire is a minimum. I think asking for our children not to be murdered is a minimum. Asking for them to stop funding an illegal apartheid is a minimum. Asking them to stop using illegal phosphorus gas is a minimum. Asking for them to give them access to clean food and water rather than forcing them to starve to death is also a minimum. And asking for our rights back to our own land as Indigenous people of that land is also a minimum. These are just basic human rights of not only liberation, of just humanitarian overall. So a ceasefire is a start, but it doesn't necessarily mean that all is well, especially with the overwhelming amount of money that they have continuously used to support this genocide and this oppressive regime. It once again goes back to the extension of white imperialism in the Middle East and the fact that like calling for a ceasefire doesn't negate the fact that there have already been lives lost and that the struggle has been an ongoing existence for 75 years. I mean, previous to the horrible events of October 7th, Gaza has been in an open air prison before that for the past 16 years with limited access to food and water, which is another violation of the Geneva Convention. So if we're talking about all of this, no, not all is well, but it's a start so that we can start having the right conversations. But until that happens, we need to continue to use our voices to call for a ceasefire at a minimum, because that is what is most important right now.
Right. So unfortunately, there may be a lot of people who might agree with you, but will make the argument, oh, if Trump, God forbid, were to be president, he will be a lot worse. So because of that, we have to vote for Biden, So what would you say to people who make that case in terms of well, I guess in this case, the greater of the two evils to kind of justify, us voting for Biden? So people who kind of say that, and I'm interested to hear how that makes you feel as a Palestinian. Like,
Absolutely. There's so many things that I would like to say about this topic, starting with the fact that the polarized parties in America is definitely like an egocentric issue that is only centralized to America. But what's going on in Palestine isn't a Republican versus a Democratic issue. It is a humanitarian crisis that everyone around the globe has basically been calling for a ceasefire. So kind of trying to insert the American problems into this narrative that has nothing to do with America itself, or like, should I say the American political parties, is somewhat dehumanizing and contributes to the erasure that this isn't a bigger conflict than it actually is. With that said, I think irregardless of what political party any candidate is affiliated with, they should not be monopolizing on Palestinian lives or the Palestinian struggle. Like, at the end of the day, Palestinians are human the same way all other people on this earth are human. And our voices in our struggle for liberation isn't just a tactic for you to gain votes in this next election. So I think that it goes to say that we will no longer be choosing between the lesser evils, because that's irrelevant when we're talking about a humanitarian crisis. We need to continue deciding on voting for policies that we think are right, rather than just simply affiliating with a party that we most align with.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. We've been there. So
yeah.
I mean, I think that's my frustration for sure when people, especially on the left, will mention this issue only because it affects Biden, and his re-election campaign. So I appreciate your thoughts there,
Yeah, it's not Biden and his administration. I mean, the United States has had a history of funding Israel as an imperialist state, as we are colonialized, like we have colonialized nations. And yes, we are speaking about Palestine now, but we will continue to fight for the liberation of all people, regardless of where they are around the world. And it has nothing to do with just Biden. It has something to do with the fact that any presidential administration needs to recognize that they need to do better when they're making decisions on behalf of their people.
Yeah.
So you guys were very fortunate to come to DC. I actually wish I knew that, because I'm based in DC. I could have met up with you guys there. But you went to the protests in DC over the weekend. I wasn't able to go. This time I went to the first one. So can you share your thoughts in terms of what you witnessed on Saturday and just your overall view of what you might have heard or something that might have stuck out to you? Maybe just as far as speaking or just the support that you got that was obviously there in terms of having, I think it was almost 500,000 people represented, to show solidarity to Palestine. So,
Do you mind if I
Yeah, go ahead.
answer
Please
that
do
first?
it.
Thank you. I was honestly very overwhelmed. I felt like a strong sense of community and resilience and pride just seeing all the people there. And I think it goes to show that what necessarily the media covers when talking about this narrative isn't necessarily reflective of the actual support that we have amongst the people. So it was definitely very heartwarming to see the sort of overall national community showing solidarity with the Palestinians, regardless of which background they came from. So I was very happy to be there and to be a part of such a historic moment for me. And I think it just once again goes to show that the we are waking up to conflicts that have nothing to do with what the media is covering. So I think people are becoming more aware of certain humanitarian struggles, and they are going to continue to show up and use their voices to support struggles for liberation.
and Marcus, any thoughts regarding what you witnessed over the weekend?
Yeah, so I was about to say I ended up missing it, but actually, and I think this will tie in because we never stopped working and they never stopped visiting our state. So Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris, came down this past Monday for Martin Luther King Day.
Oh,
So
God.
like again, so that here we go again meme from San Andreas. But so there was some people in Columbia, which is like our state capital, organized around it already. I was out there, and same feeling, even though on a much smaller level. There was folks fighting for reparations there, and we was out there. I had my trombone, and you could hear it if you look at her speech. The first half of the speech, you could hear like if you listen to it, you can hear in the background like reparations now, and you hear like that, like and Free Palestine. You hear all that in the background, and we weren't able to interrupt like we did for the Biden one, but they're still feeling our effects. So that's what I did this past weekend. And I went the first one too. And I saw my brother Muhammad El Kurd speak. And we actually spoke. We shut down Harvard, I want to say October, because we spoke, and, they was hating and they shut down the campus. But we spoke in like a Black Palestinian solidarity thing. And this is like 2021, I believe. But yeah, so he spoke at the first DC rally. And I hugged him. I was like, bruh. Because I've been thinking about him the whole time this, conflict been going since October. So like it was good seeing him just like hug him and let him know. Cause like, we still got you down in South Carolina and just, touch base with him. But,
Right. So actually, Marcus, I want to ask you from one Black man to another, because there's some of us within our community who might say, oh, we get the idea of what's happening in Palestine, but we as Black people have no business getting into the affairs of Palestinians or whatever. That's not a concern for us and all that kind of stuff. So what would you say to those people in regards to, just us being in solidarity with Palestinians in terms of the conflict?
well, one, I tell them to crack up a history book. And need an activist who you celebrate, like Malcolm X, James Baldwin, Angela Davis. The list goes on. Kwame
Muhammad
Ture.
Ali. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, but I say that list goes on even the historical analysis. But even if you look, even like the average Black person considers themselves woke or on point. I even have some, but like we have mad Egyptian, like the pharaohs and the Pharisees. Like we love the Egyptian culture. Do you know what Palestine is? Egypt is right here. So even on a geopolitical thing, and if you see all the forces that have been standing up for Palestine, who is it? South Africa, Namibia, a lot of these African countries, and even South America, but specifically Africa, have been standing up. And it's like if we want to be respected in this state or in this country, we're gonna have to have a strong Africa. So we're talking about Marcus Garvey and we're talking about Pan-Africanism, but it is really common sense. Like if we're not respected in Africa and Africa is not a strong continent, we will never get respect or our liberation in this country. So as the common thing said, it's like until one of us are free, until all of us free, none of us are free. And regardless of our proximity to it, we shouldn't be like allow our comfort, our supposed comfort in this empire, allow us to be what's the word, disaffected or like not care about people's issues. And I feel like sometimes the society we live in is so individualistic, and I feel like we've like drawn away from some more of our African roots of like communalism and sharing things and caring about each other. Like it's all about if it don't make dollars, it don't make sense type of a mentality that I feel like is breaking a little bit now because like you can't have that when you see like a massacre happening on your phone every day. So I feel like that narrative is a little bit changing, but we still have it. Like things are hard to unlearn. So I have had those conversations, and that's usually how I like try to draw it out. Like, do you care about you know what I mean? Like, do you stand? What do you stand on? You know what I mean? Also, even if you don't care about what happens in the global sphere, Israel and how much funds goes from your tax dollars goes to Israel. Like you like we did a study here, and I can send y'all the sources for it. But our city of Charleston or Charleston County, we spend upwards of like 2 million in how much we contribute to Israel and federal funding. So that's our county alone, and in our states over 40 million. You have a lot of our politicians who are trying to figure out financial instruments to Israel, and our Charleston Police Force trains with Israel IOF. So like these are like direct connections that happen right here. So it's like if you care about any issues going on, even in your own neighborhood, it's directly affected by this issue. So that's an important point. And we've been having conversations on the other end. My brother Muhammad El Kur brought this up. It's like there's issues within our communities, like the Black and Muslim, Black Palestinian, that we still got to work out. Like it's not all peaches and cream, but let's work out those so we can allyship, like have true allyship and have true community. Because like it has to be accountability on both ends, like so we can be strong together and not be divided. Because that's what they want in the end. That's how they've divided and conquered a lot of our movements in the past. So that solidarity has been amazing to see.
Yeah, so I'm actually glad you brought that up because I did read your statement, I think maybe a week or two ago, and you mentioned that EBIT systems,
yeah,
Albit, sorry, has, I'm just going to read it. So this is kind of your demands. An end to Elbit Systems, a facility manufacturing weapons the IOF currently uses to commit its crimes against humanity operating in Ladson, South Carolina. Elbit Systems invested $35 million in relocation and recently opened its 145,000 square foot plant in Ladson. It receives tax cuts for its investment. A 2019 fiscal year report disclosed that company's extra revenue diverted $423 million from public schools across the state, disproportionately low income with mostly Black and brown students. And I thought actually we've been saying this on the show ad nauseum, but you kind of hit that home with that statement is in terms of for Black people to kind of say, oh, we shouldn't care. That money that is being sent towards Israel can be going towards our reparations. That money could be going towards our needs here, especially for low income families here. So, our police are trained by the IDF. So the next time you're getting beat up by the cops, think of Israel. So there's a lot. So I think you brought up a good point is that we have to be a lot more aware of what's happening globally because that does affect us, usually financially, domestically as well. You want to say, Marcus?
Yeah, one more thing I just add on, like, and that's how we ended the apartheid in South Africa. It was like student organizers and a lot of our older council members, like, I remember when I was young, I had a kafir too and things like that. So it's like a lot of older people who like had that connection with the movement and they entered it through the South Africa, like in the apartheid movement. So we've seen in our recent history even how like us organizing and shutting things down can have a direct effect to end the apartheid in other places, and that's why we're fighting in the apartheid in Israel, because that's
And-
what it is. And if you look at what it's like, it looked just like Jim Crow, like the checkpoints. You can't go on this street, you can't go on that street. Like that sound like Jim Crow to me. So
Right. I do want to ask you maybe a couple, maybe 2 or 3 more questions before we let you guys go. So going back to your church community a little bit, especially for the elders in your church, how do you, I kind of mentioned, and you can correct me, and you can speak to this in terms of your community. I just kind of feel generally that boomers in our community have generally kind of lost it. They've lost a lot of that revolutionary spirit in terms of what they experienced in the civil rights movement, that I've made the argument that they should be kind of encouraging us to lead a charge. No one really should have been on you two in terms of how you were protesting. That should have been encouraged, not stifled. So
Can I say something before?
sure. Yes. So how do you feel that's true, or yeah, go ahead, Tamara.
Like, as the person that spoke up in church, I think specifically to the older Black community of Mother Emanuel, we were well aware that we might be stepping in on toes, and we didn't want to infiltrate their safe space. So that's why we kind of sort of like worked with other members of the congregation and other members of the community, trying to see the best way to go about this, being respectful to the elder community. And with that being said, I actually, it's funny to me because I think that like 2 or 3 of the most prominent people that we have that are like have spoken at almost every single protest that we've had here in Charleston when talking about Palestinian liberation have been Black older people that have had like known about the intersectionality between Black and Palestinian liberation. And I'm not going to name any names, but they were also working during the civil rights movement and with the Black Panthers up in Harlem. And they have always sort of been on our side. So I think that it isn't necessarily that they're losing their spirit. I just think that it was the narrative.
They frozies. What happened? Why'd they freezies, Collin? They came back last time they froze. Hopefully.
Oh.
Uh-oh. Well, that's unfortunate. They haven't completely lost connection. So, what do you think?
Hold on.
Let's try this. Yeah. There we go. Here. Let's go here for a bit and let's see if we get them back. But I was about to add on to her thing anyway of like, speaking of elder community being respected, their elder community specifically they're losing their elder community. So,
Right.
you know, like I saw yesterday, there's 9-year-old journalists out in Palestine, Collin. So,
Right.
you know, but here they are.
hello.
Welcome
Yeah,
back.
we got you back. Oh.
You know,
Yeah, that, yeah, I'm sorry about that.
Don't
Yeah,
worry
we
about
were-
it. So,
I hear us.
yes.
so tomorrow you might have to repeat everything you said, or at least mostly what you said.
Yeah, in the
so
last
sorry about
10 seconds. So,
No, okay. I don't know exactly where it stopped off. So if you guys could just remind me what was the last thing that I was saying before it froze.
what do you think, Collin?
Again?
No.
Marcus!
Oh no, but
I
I think,
don't know what going
You're still
on with it.
here. You're still here. You're good.
Yeah.
So,
you were mentioning how there are 2 Black elders within your church that
we're
I
supportive
think are
of
more
you.
radical, that or we were supportive of you in terms of what you guys were doing. That's
Yeah.
kind of where you kind of cut off.
Yeah, actually, like I was just gonna say that the majority of people who have been at the forefront that have been very outspoken or sort of been guides in this experience as grassroots organizations have been older Black men and women who have been fighting for their own liberations since they were our age. Some of them were even in Harlem working with the Black Panthers and have continuously been showing up since the Civil Rights Movement, kind of fighting for the liberation of all peoples, regardless of their backgrounds. And I was just going to say that I think the narrative was misconstrued specifically on Monday because they labeled me as a white woman who was
Right.
stepping in a Black space.
Right.
And that was kind of like the biggest problem with it. But I think that actually like the older community has been one of the most supportive lights when it comes to Palestinian liberation. And
Well,
yeah,
and
that's just where I wanted to end.
speaking of
Are always like our guides and making our choices going forward.
speaking of elder communities being respected, your people's elder community is running out. Like, you know, they're I'm trying to remember the numbers there, but you know, there has to be 9-year-old journalists in Gaza right now, you know? Like there's not many elders being left over there. So, you know, I think that's a bit of a misnomer on top of that. So anything to add, Marcus?
Yeah, I mean, I was about to say that you even see as far as like on the other side, like the people who don't want to engage, you see that in older, like I've heard folks from the older Muslim community who are afraid to come out just out of concerns of safety. But what I tell them is like, if you, because they always say this, a lot of pastors, we need to listen to the youth. Yeah, the youth need to come out. Well, if y'all really want us to come out, like give us space to do that. You know what I mean? Don't just say it, do it in your actions and like make room. You know what I mean? Sometimes you don't need to take that position. Like see if somebody else want it. You know, you don't have to work your whole life. You sometimes need to retire and pass the mantle. So those conversations have been ongoing and that's throughout. And I be telling people, especially the older Black organizations, y'all ain't gonna live forever. So it's like if y'all want to have like a movement that lasts longer than you, like you need to, you know, encourage people to get involved. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I think change is definitely integral, and they are definitely a huge part of the process when it comes about change, especially just the way in which grassroots organizations now move forward. They, like I said, are our guiding light because they've done this before. So we definitely have to take their wisdom with us and use it moving forward. And it's just always I'm always so amazed by like just how much strength and resilience they have because a lot of them aren't afraid to show up, Christian, Muslim, or otherwise. Like they're always ready to show up and use their voices, and they're not afraid of the repercussions, which is very respectable.
So
Yep.
speaking of, and I think end it in a couple of minutes, but so what are next steps for you guys in terms of your organization or you guys personally?
Yeah.
mhm.
You can
So
say.
okay, so one of our really upcoming steps is we're calling for a City of Charleston ceasefire resolution. There's been similar resolutions passed throughout the country, even in places like Georgia, California, and throughout, you know, the nation. So we want to add City of Charleston to that list. City of Charleston in the 80s actually put forth a divestment resolution for South Africa. So we do have a history of standing up. That's when we had a bigger Black population. We've been hit by gentrification, so the politics is a little bit different, but we do have some support from City Council. It is, you know, everybody obviously in City Council and throughout Charleston saw the action. So people are hearing about it and aware. And yeah, that's one of our upcoming ones. And then we're also planning a lot of cultural nights, a lot of events, just getting people together. But that's one of our big ones. And there's other different statewide actions that are going on. But I'll let Tamara talk a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the biggest efforts that we are still continuing to focus on is calling for a ceasefire because like what we were trying to say in that church is still what we're trying to continue saying now. And we will continue to use our voices to uplift that message because the ceasefire is going to be beneficial for everyone. And we do hope that Charleston will be, once again, we hope that they call for a ceasefire. And that's actually what we're trying to advocate for currently with our city council. But We want this to move sort of unilaterally, and we want to continue growing our network with other organizations nationwide so that we can call for multiple ceasefire resolutions across a lot of cities, not just Charleston.
Okay. And for people who may want to get involved, even if they don't live in South Carolina, is there a way that people can support you guys, or is there a way that you know of that they can get involved in actions locally where they live that you can share with people?
Absolutely. I think that despite a lot of what the media says, using your voice is still very much important, and engaging with social media content despite a lot of huge mega corporations like Meta that's trying to sort of like subdue our voices and silence us. We need to still continue showing up regardless of where you are. Like, social media is your opportunity to sort of grow and make connections and network with a lot of people and show up to protests. And for our local people in South Carolina, feel free to follow our Instagram at Free Palestine Charleston, and we always have updates on our next plan of action over there. And we also have a Linktree for anybody who wants to get involved more in the organization aspect. But if you don't even live in Charleston, another good tip is just to honestly start organizing with other people that you find are passionate about the same things you are, because, like, surprisingly enough, we've had a lot of solidarity here in Charleston, which is crazy because I think we're such a small city, like, compared to everywhere else, but we were able to make such a huge dent. There's no limit. So
Yeah, and also just following up, encouraging, pulling up outside of social media and pulling up in person is important. If you're scared to pull up in person, work in the backgrounds, but don't be afraid and don't be passive, because passivity is the death of all movements. And there's always been, everybody always feels like one person, but that's why we have groups, and that's why we have organizations to build our power. And I encourage you to join a group. And again, like Tamara said, like, join one if there's not one.
make one, yeah.
Exactly. And again, even the action we did, you talking about like 20 people, bro. Like, you're not talking about like, we're not a syndicate. We don't got like, we're not Antifa. Like, we don't got like 500, 1,000 people. Like, it's a grassroots effort, starting in living rooms, conversations, meals. Like, that's how it go down. And like,
And we were a grassroots
humanizing it.
organization that, like, it was a collective effort between multiple grassroots organizations in Charleston.
Yeah.
So once again, the intersectionality between multiple different liberations and their struggles are very much intertwined.
Mhm.
And we work as a collective to continue unifying the people and also fighting for the liberation of all people, not just Palestinians. So
Yep.
yeah.
Well, appreciate you all showing up.
So don't forget
And
to educate yourself. You educate yourself.
yeah.
So I just want to give you guys one more opportunity. Any final words, especially for you, Tamara? I think it just really resonated with me that you said, as a Palestinian, you're not feeling that you don't necessarily have a voice. We want to give that to you now. So anything that you want to say to people who are hearing you, anything final that you want people to know, just feel free to share it now.
Yeah, absolutely. Once again, thank you guys so much for allowing me the opportunity to speak. And I think it's very important to continue to use our voices and uplift one another. So we will always stand shoulder to shoulder when fighting for the liberation of all people, regardless of their background. And we have yet to call for a ceasefire as the United States. So we need to continue doing that, and we need to continue showing up. And my other Palestinian brothers and sisters, like, I am just very happy to have such a community behind me that has been so supportive. And just again, growing up as a Palestinian American, we have always kind of been like a little bit isolated, or like not really welcomed, but we were able to like form our own communities as daughters and sons of the diaspora. And I appreciate every single one of you for continuing to show up and be proud of your Palestinian identity. And we will continue to do that.
And Marcus, any final words for you?
No, that's about it. But just as far as my Black folks and just people across the country, this will affect you. And if you feel it like it doesn't, you're wrong. And I definitely recommend, as Tamara said, do your education and don't be afraid to pull up, organize with other groups, and really amplify what's going on in your city, around the world, and make real tangible steps. And don't allow yourself to be passive or be paralyzed for saying anything. Like action has to go on, and you have to go out of your normal schedule sometimes to really push that forward. If you care about it, put some time, separate out some time, and make something happen. There's ways to get involved. We all just one person. Join an organization, join a family, and make something happen.
Marcus,
Perfect.
Tamara, thank you guys so much. And I'll say this, for people that said to you whatever regarding your protest, I know Reef and I and like our audience really appreciated what you guys were doing. So, because Biden needed to hear it, Biden needed to be stuck to, and I think the best thing that could have happened is that you've had people talking, in terms of mainstream media having to pick it up. And so I just hope that those conversations do translate into action, especially for you tomorrow in terms of your community. I hope that this will be the beginning of, of hopeful change that is positive in terms of, how people feel about Palestinians in general and what that leads to in terms of true liberation for you people and by association, everyone else. So thank you
Yep.
so much for you both for your time, and we really appreciate you being here.
Speaking of talking, get your butts in the comments down there. Tell us what you think. Do all the stuff you're supposed to do. Like, share, subscribe, all those normal things. Go find those two people. I think those are your Insta handles we have underneath you. Just making sure people know that they can find you on there. But we're gonna be right back. So don't go nowhere. We're gonna say bye to our guests, and then we'll be right back for our rest of our show. So stay tuned, people. See you again soon. This button. Where's it at? Oh, no. Almost. There we go. Bye-bye, everybody.